Hey Midgardians, I'm Clay.
And I'm Joe.
Welcome to That Midgard Show, a podcast where we discuss the Midgard campaign setting published by koboldpress.
In this episode, we take a temporary detour from the Empire of Ghouls campaign for the next few episodes and discuss the locations and lore of the Northlands before moving on to the next chapter, Catacombs of the Ghul King. In the last two episodes, we discussed the Blood Marriage chapter, which led our heroes to Wolfheim, Huldramose, and Norheim. However, we don't want to leave out the other Northlands regions while we're here.
Before we dive into this episode, we just want to take a moment and express our appreciation for you. If you're enjoying the content on That Midgard Show, we'd be absolutely thrilled if you could give our episodes a thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And don't forget to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform too. It really helps others find our show and keeps us motivated to create even more episodes for you. Thanks a lot for your support. So I'm sure that you've gathered from our previous two episodes that life is harder in the north compared to other countries south of the Neder Straits. Now, in the Fjordlands, which is also another term for the Northlands, if one runs out of firewood, they may have to face bone-racking cold or venture into the dark and dangerous forest for kindling. Everyone from the king to the lowly thrall must work hard daily to survive. Laziness or idleness is not tolerated and is considered a threat to the community. The people of the North are practical, independent, and energetic, and they endure the hardships of life without complaint. Now, what's different about the Northlands is there's really no central authority that demands taxes or any portion of the party's loot. However, no one restrains the excesses of monsters and unscrupulous rulers. So, when bandits, trolls, or a Jarl bullying huskarls come prowling, each family and their friends must choose between fight or flight. So, death is inevitable, and nothing lives one moment longer than it's fated, no matter how well prepared and defended. So in the next few episodes, we're going to focus on the life and culture of the Northlands, as well as tour the individual countries that we did not cover in the Blood Marriage, namely Bjornsreich, Stannisgard, Thirstreich, Trollheim, Hamu Hills, Thunder Mountain, Jotunheim, the Isle of the Berserkers, which is also known as Jormsborg, Vargreich, Bjornreich, the Bleak Expanse, and the lands of the Falling Wall. So that's a lot of territory to cover.
Yeah, it is a lot of territory. And I think the easiest thing to do is kind of start talking a little bit about life in the Northlands. So There's the Fila, which is the strongest bond in society outside of a family and a clan. It is a term that means fellowship and partnership, and it's associated with the power of Firun, which symbolizes the division of wealth. A person who takes the Fila oath commits to loyalty, supporting their chieftain and fellow warriors in a sacred bond between companions. This oath defines the Fila's objectives, its right to select and remove leaders, and the fair distribution of spoils. Most Northlanders are Carls, who are free farmers and artisans and occasionally raiders and traders. They are accountable only to themselves, unlike their counterparts in the southern countries' feudal hierarchies or pseudo-democracies, who are bound to a local lord by more than their own choices and oath. Carls who directly serve a lord are called huskarls, which means Carls of the house, and constitute a lord's primary allies, administrators, and personal bodyguards. A wise lord is generous with gifts and opportunities for glory, or a few Carls may seek out a new patron. Above Carls are chieftains, jarls, and kings who are noble defined by their followers, ships, and estates, but not by their bloodlines or divine providence. The North has many kings at times and none at others, but they seldom unite more than a relatively small area and never for more than a generation or two. Any ruler's power is hampered by rivals, invaders, and pretenders, and successions are always contested. Kingship is not viewed as particularly sacred or exceptional. Some rulers may claim descent from a hero or a god, occasionally backed by a real divine favor, but success is the only true measure of nobility in the North. The lowest social class is made up of thralls and slaves, who are prisoners of war or unfortunate people captured by raiders or bound servants unable to pay their debts. Most thralls lead difficult lives, but some rise from such depths. Triumph over adversity is respected by everyone. The good slaves are considered part of the family, sharing their hardships and successes with everyone else. Carls frequently free their slaves, either in their wills or by treating them as freed villagers over time. Social order is fluid and determined by one's actions. Kingship and jarldom are established through war and adventure, not guaranteed by bloodline. Now, as far as like customs of the North, the harsh landscape of the North has had a profound impact on the people who live there, regardless of race. Humans, dwarves, giants, and other societies share similarities, including their bullish mindset. If a human were to visit a Trollkin's steading or a goblin hall, they could expect to follow certain protocols. However, each species has its own biases and preferences, which can complicate matters and add unexpected turns to any adventure. For instance, Jotuns may challenge guests to giant-sized games of strength without thinking it's unfair, and kobold politics are infamous for their backstabbing nature. Additionally, the food at a troll feast may not be to everyone's taste, but it's still considered rude not to eat. Honor and reputation, hospitality and feasting, the Þings, Wergild duels, and Reavers raids are all common customs shared among the Northlanders. When Northlanders travel south, circumstances may dictate that they abandon these customs. If they are raiding, for example, they have no obligation to follow the rules of Northland society. However, Northlanders are not savages. When engaged in trade, they are often quite familiar with the foreign customs, surprising southerners with their cosmopolitan ways.
We mentioned some words that are not common in the English language, Wergild and Þing, and it's not the same as our thing. So let me start with Wergild. A Wergild is money paid to the relatives of a murder victim in compensation for loss and to prevent a blood feud. And we'll have more on this concept shortly. Now, the word Þing is pronounced differently in the Icelandic and Scandinavian dialects of our worlds, but it starts with a letter unfamiliar to the English language called a thorn, and it looks like a letter P with an ascender above the bowl. And the thorn is like our TH, which makes a thus sound in English. And we have this letter up on the screen right now. A Þing refers to an assembly of people led by a noble to discuss matters of concern to the community. These matters may include raiding, casting someone out of a clan, and other important issues. Now, in the Vikings TV series, you can see a Þing in action when Ragnar proposes they raid England early in season 1. And in fact, that show is a great analog to the Northlands in general because there's a lot of similarities. Aside from the different races in the Northlands, the culture of the Northlands is very similar to the Scandinavian countries of our world. So in this section, we will discuss Wergilds and Þings in more detail. And these are important concepts to understand if you plan to adventure in the Northlands. And you can find all this information in the Midgard World Book, which is worth reading to familiarize yourself with these concepts for creating adventures and characters. Now, the Northlands do have a democratic tradition that may surprise outsiders who live in other parts of Midgard. While families and neighbors handle local matters, every region also has a regular Þing that functions as a court assembly and trade fair. At these meetings, Northlanders settle disputes, make peace or war vows, form alliances, celebrate achievements, and invoke ancient laws. A council of wise law speakers and jarls oversees the debates and attempts to broker satisfactory settlements. But all discussions are public, and all free people can participate. Although local lords and bullies have influence in the north, significant decisions require public approval, even through intimidation and backstabbing that occurs behind the scenes. Now, even in peaceful times, there are disagreements to resolve and feuds to prevent, so the law speakers at the Þing continually make judgments on hunting and pasturage rights, unpaid debts, stolen thralls or cattle, and even on cases of kidnapping and murder. If no agreement and recompense can be reached, injured parties rely on the sanctity of duels or the declaration of a feud. The Þing also provides a venue for trading and the distribution of raid booty. Families bring slaves, cloth, fine weapons, cattle, oxen, salt, wax, hides, raw materials, and various handcrafted household goods to offer for trade. So you can think of a Þing as also kind of like a mall. And master artisans, rune masters, and wizards also attend the Þing to find customers. As cities are scarce in the region, this is the best opportunity for wealthy Northlanders to acquire exotic or magical items. And it's an opportunity for GMs to create encounters, in a Þing rather than inside a village or a town. Now, distant kings and powerful jarls may sometimes send warriors and silver-tongued bards to the Þing to safeguard their interest. However, locals despise such emissaries, and it's not uncommon for them to have their heads removed and sent back to their masters as a message that communities prefer to manage their own affairs. These actions and duels are the only violence allowed at the Þing, although most attendees consider it a poor event if fewer than 3 or 4 people die during a moot. Death is considered great entertainment, a fine sacrifice, and an excellent way to remind everyone of the importance of Þing peace. Now, most things take place at a traditional spot, such as a sacred glade, a blessed rock, a world tree, or other hallowed locations. Borders are a typical site, allowing rival regions to remain separate between debates. A nearby hall may host prominent visitors, but most people camp in the surrounding fields.
Yeah, I find the Þing kind of interesting. It's like this. It feels like a cross between a few different things like that we've seen in real life and fiction. The Dothraki from Game of Thrones, for instance, have that meeting place, that centralized meeting place that acts as a market and things like that, where they can trade and do all this stuff. But at the same time, in that version, there's no fighting, there's no weapons allowed there. But like, remember at the wedding, they said the same thing, like a wedding without at least a few deaths is a poor event. So I feel some of those vibes there as well. But then like when you kind of add in like the Norse side to it, it makes me wonder a bit about kind of that society. And like, I know if you watch, like you brought up the Viking show, they would hoard their wealth and like bury it so they can like have it in the afterlife or something like that sometimes too. So I wonder if some of that kind of goes on in the Northlands as well.
Yeah, totally. I mean, there's a lot of great ideas, and particularly inspiration, from those 2 shows in particular. And the concept of the Northlands democratic nature or kind of self-rule, is pretty interesting because it's essentially individuals enforcing the rules and customs of the area and not, other people like police and magistrates and judges and so forth.
Right.
So if you do something wrong or your behavior is just despicable, it's not uncommon for locals to just deal with it themselves right then and there. They'll probably report the activity at the next Þing, but they're not going to mess around. So your party needs to behave and understand the culture and the rules. And it's a great encounter when a faux pas occurs that you could inadvertently cause combat, for the simplest infraction. Yeah. Or if you refuse to sit down at the table and eat what's served to you, that could be a great offense, something that we'll talk about later in this episode for sure.
Yeah. And, the other thing too is we talk about like the political intrigue type campaigns. It could happen more easily here because the current Jarl is really just somebody who people respected and followed, and he has some power and he has some strength. He did some cool stuff. So people are like, all right, he's our leader. But he could have a rival in the village that your party can end up helping, and that power can change hands so easily and so quickly because it's not a blood right. It's not like, oh, well, he has no right to be king. If he's strong, he's king. He's their ruler. So there's a lot of opportunity to cause a power shift in an area of the Northlands.
Someone in your party can actually kill something and find themselves to be the Jarl of the region, unexpectedly.
Sounds like something the bard would do.
Yeah, exactly. So why don't we get into a little bit more about justice in the Northlands, Joe?
Yeah. So Northlanders have this very unique perspective on justice. They believe that only specific actions like stealing or defaming someone are actually considered criminal offenses. And get this, the idea of justice is less about moral righteousness and more about making things right through compensation. If the wrongdoer has not committed an egregious crime, they may not be treated as criminals by the victims or the general public. In such cases, a fine known as a Wergild is usually imposed on the offender. The payment is made in silver rings to the victim or the family, and in turn, the victim and their family swear to let the matter go. Dueling is another option, right? So questioning someone's honor, accusing them of a crime or cowardice, or falsely claiming credit for heroic deeds is asking for a fight. In some cases, this happens accidentally, especially during drunken gatherings, and can be resolved with a sincere apology, but sometimes only bloodshed can heal wounded pride. If the offender fails to apologize publicly within 3 days of the offense, a Holmganka duel is initiated, which roughly translates to going to the island. These duels usually take place on an island at a crossroads in a sacred glade or on a cloth stake to the ground. Each warrior can bring their personal arms, armor, and 3 shields to the dueling ground. A round of fighting ends when a shield is broken or thrown down, allowing for a brief respite of no more than a minute to catch one's breath. The fight continues until one combatant flees or is unable to continue, such as dying. People of all professions are expected to participate in duels when necessary. If a duel seems unfair, a champion can fight in one's place, or the defender can appeal to the local Þing and request for the duel to be declared unjust. Failure to appear earns the reputation of being a nithing, which is a coward, and can result in outlawry for a year or 2. Outlawry, basically outlaws, are those who have been banished from society as a form of punishment. They can be outcast by choice or circumstances. Beggars and respected jarls can be declared outlaws for committing crimes. An outlaw is considered to be outside the law and can be killed without penalty or fear of Wergild or feud. The families are expected to treat them as if they were dead, and strangers are not to offer them hospitality or aid, treating them as they would a wolf scratching at the door. Sometimes a bounty is offered by the outlaw's victims, and jarls reward anyone who kills a known outlaw. Outlawry can be for a lifetime or for a set period, which can be a year or 3 years, or until the king or jarl who declared it is dead. Outlawry only applies to the outlaw's local Þing. Depending on the crime, an outlaw might be ignored or welcomed in neighboring lands. Outlawry doesn't carry much stigma. It's an occupational hazard for most adventurers, but the deed behind it might significantly reflect on the outlaw's reputation. We also deal with feuds. If a disagreement cannot be solved through peaceful means, such as a debate or Holmganka, a feud may begin. In such cases, the immediate and extended family, neighbors, and friends of the victim are expected to take revenge on the criminal and their kin. While some may be motivated by a genuine sense of justice, more often than not, it's an excuse for robbery and murder. Feuds can quickly spiral out of control, and as each side tries to settle debts, leading to an ever-expanding circle of violence that can last for generations. While pressure from the Þing can sometimes end feuds, they typically continue until one side is destroyed, flees the area, or both sides become weary of the contested bloodshed. All factions will try to recruit adventurers to aid them, whether officially or unofficially, and asking for allies or the duty of guests to their host are easy ways to get honorable characters embroiled in a conflict, sometimes on the wrong side. Even intervening in a fight can pull an unwilling party into the feud or cause a fresh one. So, here again, and kind of more what we talked about a few minutes ago about how easily a party can get pulled into these feuds, can cause strife, within a community of the Northlands, could cause the changing of hands of leadership. All sorts of things can happen just with the wrong words. So it can be touchy.
Right. And it's that underlying tension or the culture in general that could really be woven into a story by a clever GM. If you've ever traveled, even to Europe, it's easy for an American to just do something stupid that would offend a local. And it's the same in your game playing too, where you can introduce such offenses into the storyline to either get your party locked up in some way, or start a fight, or get them embroiled in a conflict that they didn't even realize that they are embroiled into until later on in the adventure. Why are these people constantly attacking us? Well, you remember that time in the bar that you said this? Well, that's why. So that's some things that you can interact, and it's something that the koboldpress writers and even Wolfgang stress is introduce the culture in a way that creates either great encounters or problems for your party. It's all about that status, that status mechanic that's in the game setting.
Yeah, for sure. And there, like I said, there's a lot of opportunity for it. I love Wolfgang's style of doing that. If you ever seen him actually do it, it's some of his stuff is coming out. It just comes out of left field. He catches the party off guard very, very easily. And you're sitting there in the hall of a jarl or some, king, and thinking you're doing everything right, and you're used to those southern customs, and you do or say something wrong or to the wrong person, and now you're embroiled in a whole conflict. So the North is cool. The North, there's just so much potential for cool stuff. And if you want to run more of like kind of maybe the more mercenary party for hire, will do pretty much anything. Not necessarily evil campaign, but underhanded. Very easy to have a Jarl's rival contact the party and want them to help assist in overthrowing that Jarl.
Yeah. And we've talked about honor and reputation, throughout this episode, but it's a very important concept, because Wergild, dueling, and outlawry all center around an individual's honor and reputation in the Northlands. Both honor and reputation hold great value, even more value than actual gold or silver, and they are passed down through stories told by warriors and songs sung by skalds, including both noble and wicked deeds. Now, the one thing that the Northlanders love to do is to share news and gossip, regardless of their social status. And a good reputation motivates people to be generous, brave, and hospitable, while a bad reputation is feared and hard to shake off. Northlanders are known for their strong sense of honor, and they believe their name is the only thing that remains after death, and they strive to do the right thing and be seen doing it. However, it's important to note that honor and goodness are not the same thing. Even wicked reavers can be considered honorable, while some Northlanders who abandon cruel customs are seen as dishonorable. Regardless of their alignment, an honorable Northlander is known for their generosity, fairness, and bravery in battle, and such values are highly respected by the gods. At the same time, those who are able to bend and manipulate these customs to achieve their goals are highly regarded by the more cunning deities. In addition to honor, cleverness and wit are also highly valued. Northlanders are expected to be skilled poets, able to navigate the temperamental nature of the gods, and be considered cunning by both friends and foes. They face life stoically, remaining calm even in the most difficult circumstances. Northlanders understand that no human or deity can escape their fate, and that complaining is futile. So a great example of this is also from the TV show Vikings. You can see very happy people engaged in battle, and bloodthirsty battle. Loki, one of the giggling character on Vikings, would wield his axe and plunge it into somebody's skull while smiling and telling a story to the person battling next to them. So it's just kind of a fun thing to see. It's different to how combat is depicted in other shows, where it's not fun. It's a task. It's a job. It's like taking out the garbage.
Yeah, it's brutal. People are scared. The soldiers think this might be their last day, where in this culture, it's like they're excited. It's an honor to die on the field of battle with your weapon in your hand. You also talk about the cunning and wit, and we see that in the show too, with the strategies they use to defeat their enemies. When they sacked Paris, Faith being a Christian, to get a funeral when he died, and then they popped out of the coffin and weapons and start going at it. just the cunning and the wit and the strategy. These are all things that are highly valued, and it's just a really interesting society. And I would almost recommend just running a whole campaign up in the Northlands at some point, because it would just be absolutely fun. It would be so fun. You can easily go level 1 through 20 up in the Northlands and just have a blast.
Oh, yeah. Anywhere in Midgard for that example.
Anywhere in Midgard. Northlands is
if you're gonna adventure in a region, stay in the region. Empire of the Ghouls drops you in different parts of the world, and they did that on purpose because they want to expose a new party of people to Midgard and to the different parts of Midgard, and also showcase how very different each region is.
Yeah.
When you look at like Faerun, the Forgotten Realms, to me, and many will disagree, but to me, it's very homogenous. It's the same. Every country is ruled by humans. There's the same hierarchy of folks. The city is either ruled by criminals or by hereditary nobles and stuff like that. And again, I know many of you would disagree with me on that, but when you look at Midgard is not homogenous in one way, shape, or form. In fact, you can go from one country to the next, right next to each other, and experience completely different cultures, completely different forms of government, completely different races. And that's what I love about Midgard.
Yeah, it definitely allows for you to run different styles of games. Like back in second edition AD&D, right? We used to I want more of the traditional thing. I'm going to run Dragonlance or Forgotten Realms or Bellyhammer. Like there was these specific settings for these different types of cultures, where in Midgard, it's one setting with all these different cultures within it. So you can choose a region and run in that. You can have the two culture, the culture shock of going from one to the other. There's so much that can be done, and we know Midgard kind of does reflect, our real world in certain ways with certain cultures and things like that. But it makes it a lot of fun to explore and see. So I've become such a fan.
Hence is the reason why we do this show.
Do this show, exactly.
Yeah, we are fanboys to the infinite degree, for sure.
But one of the big things in the Northlands, since we're talking about all these different cultural things, feasting and hospitality become a very important part of that culture. Providing hospitality is actually one of the most important duties of honor. A warm hearth, a healthy or hearty meal, strong walls are the only refuge from that dark and dangerous wilderness. And welcoming guests is one of the few ways to learn foreign news and gossip. How someone behaves as a guest or a host is considered a significant indication of their character. In exchange for the host's generosity, guests repay them not with money, but by behaving themselves, defending their host from harm, and giving their own gifts or assistance in times of need, while staying under the host's roof. Even mortal enemies and monsters adhere to the rules of hospitality, or at least the letter of it. However, local notions of what's hospitable may not match the traveler's expectations. From the farmer dining with family members and hired hands each evening, to a jarl hosting her shield maidens and huskarls, or a king celebrating a major religious festival, the communal meal is an essential aspect of northern culture. At the feast table, warriors get to know each other, deciding issues of stature and building camaraderie required to survive as a warband or army. Outside of martial groups, feasts commemorate harvest and other significant calendar days, offer praise to the gods, and help to unite families and communities. The day's events are discussed, gossip is shared, and deals are made.
So, one unique aspect of the Northlands is how they view fate. And fate rules their lives. It's just taken very nonchalant. So much like the masks worn by the gods of Midgard, fate takes on different forms depending on the culture considering it. In the Northlands, people believe that destiny is written by the moment. Every choice, they believe, changes a person's fate. Now, in the Midlands, that's the area between the Ruby Sea and the Nieder Straits, the continent that Zobek resides on. Fate is thought to be unalterable, but secret, and everyone must uncover their own destiny. Now, in the Southlands, most people view fate as something between those two extremes. They believe that certain events are predetermined, but that choices and decisions can change the outcome of those events. One's fate is often compared to a carved rune, a long thread, or even a complicated tapestry, depending on which theologian is talking. An individual's fate is never truly revealed until after their life is spent. Now, if an expedition is lost at sea or a companion is killed, Northerners attribute it to destiny. People's actions are predestined, and their choices have already been woven. However, Northern people manage to travel through life with a cheerful attitude of resignation, believing that everything that happens is meant to be. Despite this, they hope that a better thread of fate awaits them tomorrow. Curses and prophecies are common in the North, but stoic acceptance of one's fate is an integral part of the Northern character. While chance doesn't play a significant role in Northern individuality, luck is highly valued. Good or bad fortune is not random, but is tied to fate. Luck is simply how one's destiny plays out, and calling something lucky or unlucky is much the same as calling it good or bad. Now, because lucky people and fortunate women are believed to be signs of fate, Northerners tend to ally with those favored by fate and distance themselves from those they view as unlucky. Now, no matter which concept of fate a culture adheres to, one aspect remains constant. The three sisters are believed to be the guardians of it all. Most individuals revere or even fear their work, even if they do not understand all the details. Now, the three sisters are also called the Norns, and they are three powerful beings who weave the thread of destiny for both God and mortals. No one can escape their final fate. The destiny of everything in the world is predetermined and cannot be denied. So, an example. Baldur, a god, had dreams that foreshadowed his death, and he knew that an underworld hall was waiting for him. Wotan, his father, knew of the coming of Ragnarok long before it happened and understood that he would die with the Fenris wolf's jaws around his throat. His son prepared for years, crafting the weapon he knew would avenge his father. In the North, people don't believe in coincidence. When old friends or enemies meet, they acknowledge their destined reacquaintance. Now, in our world, in Norse mythology, the Norns are three goddesses of fate who live beneath the world tree, Yggdrasil. Their names are Urad, Verdandi, and Skuld, which means what has been, what is, and what is to come, respectively. Now, in Midgard, it's different. Their names are Kadara, Ayanmo, and Oya, which means what shall be, what comes into being, and what once was, respectively. And they live at the Well of Urad, which is both a location in the high jungles of the Black Lotus Mesa and a separate demi-plane, a nexus of planar power. Now, its waters pour out over the jungles through a fist-sized planar hole called the Celestial Waterfall. The Well of Urad is positioned directly above the Black Lotus Mesa and the Sky Nation of Ardval, but it is wholly separate from them. Now, some scholars say that the Well of Urad lies within Asgard, but most of them agree that it is situated at the base of one of the three great roots of Yggdrasil, which stretches from Midgard to the furthest plains and ends at a location of the well. These three roots nourish Yggdrasil and its many offshoots, and each play a pivotal role in the inner workings of the universe. Now, the Well of Urad is a place where the three sisters, or Norns, reside in Midgard. They are responsible for overseeing the destinies of gods and men. The three sisters take turns every day to carve runes upon the root of Yggdrasil, while each rune represents the fate of an individual. Each of the three sisters represents a key point in the cyclical flow of time. For those who manage to find their way here to the Well of Urad, the three sisters can offer profound wisdom and answer questions about the fabric of their fate. Sometimes they might even allow mortals to be present in their cottage or at the table of the gods, where deities gather to barter, bicker, or debate their inexplicable schemes. However, fate is unpredictable, and the Norns can just as easily accept or strike down mortals on sight. Now, although the three sisters are not deities, oracles, and sages who hope to gain insight into their future, sometimes whispers prayers to them. So fate can either in your games be an antagonist, a protagonist, or both. And again, it's something that could be woven into the story, could be talked about by locals. You get a mug of beer broken over your head, and some guy goes, that's your fate." And at some point in my Southlands campaign, my party will visit the three sisters, because you can visit them. You just have to find them, and you just have to find the location. So, look for the waterfall out of the sky and go somewhere underneath it and see if you can find them.
I feel like my bard needs a shirt that says "Fate happens."
Fate happens.
It's funny though. When you're looking at this, obviously this is reflected in real world Norse mythology. But it's funny is that similar stories take place in other cultures as well. Even the Greeks had have stories about these three old women who weave the strings of fate.
Right.
So it's repeated throughout cultures, throughout history, cultures that never even interacted. It's really, really interesting to see how those and wonder how those stories moved around the world. And what I love about Midgard is it answers that very simply with masks, right? These are the same gods up north that they are in the south, that they are in the east, wearing different masks, but representing the same thing. So but the idea of fate in your game is almost interweaves with things like destiny, because what is yet to come, things like that. If you have a character who maybe is a demigod or the son of a god, those threads of fate can play a significant role in what's coming. And I love the idea of what you're saying about actually getting there and visiting the sisters. I'm sure it's not going to be like, oh yeah, here's all the answers. It's going to be very cryptic, right? It's going to be like, here's clues that you have to kind of figure out what those mean. They're going to say things, and then those things are going to appear at some point in the campaign, and the player's going to go, oh. So it's a chance for you to really, I don't know, seed the adventure, seed things into the players' minds, and do some really fun writing and create it, really express your creativity with what these cryptic threads of fate actually mean to the players and to their backstories and to the campaign. So definitely something to explore in your game.
Yeah, I mean, I utilized fate in a backstory of one of my characters. It's a Southlands-based character. His name is Chanza, and he's from a tribe in the Southlands. It's in the country that is very reminiscent of the Zulus. And after battle, Chanza was drunk out of his mind, and he swore this blood oath. And when he woke up the next morning, he couldn't remember what that oath was, but his friends around him did, and he was cast out. And he was told, find out what your blood oath is, deal with it, and then you can come back. Very simple trope, that takes fate into consideration, and even though it's not overt, it's very underlying in the character's backstory. And when I play that character, I'm constantly talking about the blood oath, how he needs to figure out what that is. I mean, in actuality, he's looking for somebody who can cast wish, so he can find out what his blood oath is. And it's also a way for NPCs to really mess with Chanza, by saying, "Oh, I know what your blood oath was. It's this," and it may not be that. So
did he still hasn't found out to this day?
No, he's like level 15 right now. Still doesn't know what his blood oath is, and continues to adventure to make sure that he can find out what that was. And the DM of the game really likes to mess with that. At one point, what he couldn't remember was that he was the lover of Baba Yaga. And
wow, okay.
And Chanza's immediate reaction was, "Ooh." Really?
Yeah, exactly. Ooh. It's a good reaction. That's an appropriate reaction to that statement.
Right. He just says, "No, I don't think she's my style."
I feel like though, at level 15, right, this is about the time he needs to find out, right? Because that's a great tier 4. A tier 4 arc is to now I found out, and now I have to actually fulfill my oath.
Right. And I've been playing this character, oh gosh, 8 years.
Probably. Yeah.
And still, but that's the part I put in his backstory. That gives a lot of meat and gristle to the GMs to play with, and that's why I think backstories are very important in the game.
Yeah. I really like to weave them into my players. Like I do kind of like the whole web thing. I figure out, here are their backstories. Here's what my campaign is. How could I weave pieces of my campaign into their backstories, make it a part of it? So a good backstory really helps drive the campaign. It helps with the sandbox style too. So if that's what you like, if you want to maybe have more of a sandboxy campaign, those backstories are key, man. Give your if you're a player, not a GM listening to this, give your GM some good backstories to mess with,
Right. And the backstory doesn't have to be long and extensive. It could just be a paragraph. And keep it vague. There are some things that you need to be specific about, and there's things that you don't need to be specific about. So backstory is important.
I was gonna say Xanathar's Guide to Everything has a great thing on not so much backstories, but background kind of deal, like where you can generate who your family was, things like that. Like I've rolled up on all those tables, and then I said, okay, cool, I have this information, and I use that to write my backstory.
Right.
And it was a lot of fun. It gave family members' names or friends' names and all this stuff that the GM was able to play with, and it was awesome. So I definitely recommend checking out those tables in Xanathar's as well.
Yeah.
So
we've hit you with a lot of lore in this episode, and I think we'll stop here and move on to our creature showcase. Joe, what do you have for us today?
Well, I tossed this one around a little. I wanted to stay Northlands themed for us, and there's so much cool stuff up there. But I picked one that I thought could be all around useful for any game in the Northlands. So let me set it for you. So you've trekked for many days through the snow of the frozen north in search of the Temple of Boris, which may hold an ancient weapon that can aid you in your quest. Finally, you have found it in the middle of a wasteland of snow and ice. As you approach, the ground in front of you seems to shift. Two creatures emerge from the frozen ground and appear to be made of ice themselves. Before you have a chance to react, one of them reaches forward and grabs one of your companions. They let out a scream of pain as ice begins to form around their legs and slowly creeps up their body. They're unable to move and begin to struggle to free themselves. The other creature advances on you. Roll for initiative. So what we have here is a pair of ice elementals. So I always like elementals. Elementals are such great creatures all around. Obviously, we have the four basic ones that cover most things, but there's others out there, right? We've seen so many other homebrewed things from mud to dust to, in this case, ice. So you can set an elemental in any environment really easily, and they're just fun creatures. These creatures are not too tough. They're only CR5, which is why I put two of them in this scenario. But depending on the party size and strength, I would add a few more or even maybe up their stats a little if I wanted to. In Midgard, ice elementals are generally summoned by the followers of Boris to protect frozen temples to their deity. These temples are usually in cold locations in the north, like I described, but they can also be found in more temperate climates as well in some cases. Now, the ice elementals are resistant to non-magical physical damage, as you kind of expect, and obviously they're going to be immune to cold and poison. They cannot be paralyzed, they can't be petrified, they can't be poisoned, fall unconscious, or be exhausted. So some limitations there to what you might be able to do to them. When it comes to fighting them, they have the ability to burrow through non-magical ice, and they can move across and climb icy surfaces without the need for ability checks, which is very similar to like a spider's web walking, just with ice instead. Their basic attack is just like a claw attack. They hit you, right? And it's for about 22 damage, 48 plus 4. And then they have the Encase in Ice ability, which you got a taste of in my intro. So when they hit with this, it does 46 cold damage, and the target has to make a DC 14 con save. And if they fail, they're restrained by ice. However, on their next turn, they have to repeat the save. And if they fail, they become completely encased in ice, and they have the petrified condition. So just completely frozen in a block of ice. Now, to get out of that, it's not as bad as petrified in stone like a Medusa or something. But to get out of that, you have to spend an hour in a warm environment or take 10 fire damage. Will melt the ice and free you up. However, there's one last thing to mention. This is really one of my favorite things about this creature. If you hit it with bludgeoning damage, any creature within 5 feet of it takes 1d6 piercing damage as shards of ice fly out from the body. This is actually an ability that one of my DMs for games I play in, he's used this before with like creatures of wood and other stuff like that. Where he did it with a bone creature recently, where it was this big bone creature, and every time I hit it with my mace, I took piercing damage, D6 piercing damage as pieces fly out. Take note of this ability. Use it on any creature that you think, if it gets hit, pieces are going to fly off. It doesn't have to be ice. It can be bone. It can be wood. It can be, anything that would have pieces fly out, and add that ability onto other creatures, because it's such a cool ability. It really wreaks some havoc on the melee people in the group. But
yeah, elementals are fun creatures, and
elementals are fun.
Yeah, my daughter and I, we watched The Last Airbender together, the original series, and we had these debates over what we thought was the most powerful of all the elements. And where we landed was water. Water can pierce metal and rock and put out fire and carve through earth. Ice elemental, even being in the Northlands, is powerful. And I tend to bulk them up a little bit to add other features, such as, a cutting attack or something like that with like a water elemental and things like that. So great choice. A lot of fun to play, and, often overlooked.
Yes. And what's interesting, you brought up the water elementals. Ice elementals and water elementals tend to not like each other very much. They each sees the other as like the weaker form, even though they're both from the plane, the plane of water. Essentially, the ice elementals feel that they are stronger because of their ice nature. They are physically stronger, where the water elementals sees their reliance on cold as a weakness. So if they ever come together, they'll kind of like argue. They'll poke at each other in Aquan. And they may even fight a little. So they tend to not like each other.
Yeah. And I tend to toughen up ice elementals because I live in northern climates of the United States. And when it gets super cold, ice can be almost as hard as steel. And when you're beating ice, trying to chip away ice from your sidewalk and stuff like that, it's hard and it's tough. So I almost think the AC for ice elemental is a little low, but that's the beauty of the game. That's the beauty of the game. Buff it up, make some slight changes to your ice elementals. You're not going to break D&D, I promise you.
One thing too, by the way, so I mentioned buffing him up just like you did, right? I would definitely buff him up, give him more hit points, give him more AC. And if you want to give him another ability, you just talked about Avatar, and if you've watched the live action one, there's a part where she basically takes like a stack of ice and starts throwing it out like the Earthbenders do. And that's totally an ability I would give it, is like this kind of like, throw ice and make it like a ranged attack, bludgeoning damage that they can maybe even do more than one in a round. Maybe it's a multi-attack. They can do 2 or 3 of them at a time. If you really want to buff them up, it'd be a cool ability to add to an ice elemental. But
yeah, agree.
Basically, give an ice elemental or water elemental, give them water bending. That's all you got to do is give them water bending.
Yeah, love the show, love the concept. So
yes, yep. So what do you got for us?
Yeah, I'm going to the other end of the spectrum, and I'm going with a far more powerful creature as well. So, let me set this up for you.
Sure.
As you venture deeper into the ancient crypt, the air grows colder and the sense of foreboding settles over the group. The dim light of your torches flickers against these walls, casting eerie shadows that seem to dance and twist with a life of their own. Trinkets and coins are found everywhere you explore until you come into a room that contains nothing but a huge pile of bones. Suddenly, you hear the unmistakable sound of bones clattering against stone, echoing through this large space. Peering cautiously out of the pile of bones, you see the source of the noise, a massive skeletal dragon. Its bones bleached white with age, slowly prowling the chamber ahead. But this is no ordinary dragon. As the creature moves out of the bone pile, a cloak of inky shadows billows around its form, lending it to an otherworldly aura. You stumbled into the lair of an Ankou, a servant of the gods of death, charged with the solemn duty of ushering souls to their final rest. As the Ankou catches sight of your party, it pauses, its hollow eye sockets fix upon you with chilling intensity. Without a word, it begins to shift and contort, its form morphing and changing before your eyes. Now standing before you is not a dragon, but a humanoid figure clad in tattered robes. Its features obscured by darkness, it speaks, and its voice echoes unnaturally in the chamber. Who dares disturb the sanctity of this place? It demands, its tone cold and menacing. These halls belong to me, and you trespass at your own peril. Leave now and live. We'll meet again in the future. Stay and die, then I'll usher your soul onward. With a flick of its spectral hand, the Ankou summons forth spectral energies, ready to defend itself against any who would dare challenge a Soul Herald. As the air crackles with arcane power, you realize that if you fight, you are in for one unlike any other. A battle not just against a fearsome foe, but against the very forces of death itself. What would you like to do? So imagine a creature of immense power and ancient wisdom, shrouded in the darkness of the underworld. The Ankou Soul Herald comes from Creature Codex, and it stands tall, its skeletal form adorned with a cloak of inky shadows that seem to pulse with spectral energy. This gargantuan CR21 dragon, though neutral in alignment, exudes an aura of solemn authority and dread. Now, clad in AC-18 natural armor, the Ankou Soul Herald possesses unparalleled resilience, with its bones infused with the essence of death itself. Its towering presence is matched only by its formidable capabilities in combat. Now, according to the lore in Midgard, an Ankou is a servant of the gods of death. Each century, the first dragon to die is resurrected as an Ankou under the auspices of the death gods. Their task is to live a second life as an apparition and guide the souls of the dead to their final resting places. So they're reapers, essentially. Now, the role of the Ankou is one that few dragons would willingly accept, despite its necessity in the world. Some dragons even resort to extreme measures to avoid being the first to die in a new century, such as accepting lichdom rather than taking on the duty of an Ankou. The gods of death are reluctant to share secrets with mortals, but it is known that the dragons who become Ankou serve for eternity. All Ankou obey the gods of death without question. They greet their souls of the deceased at the moment of their passing and escort them across the plains to their final resting place. So stumbling into an Ankou's lair may be the fate of our heroes. So maybe it's time for a TPK. A single Soul Herald Ankou serves directly beneath the gods of death. This Ankou commands the ranks of an Ankou Soul Seeker, which is also in Creature Codex. Now, typically, a single Seeker claims and transports a soul to the Herald, who resides in an extraplanar retreat. The Herald then presents the soul to the gods of death personally. Now, with a keen intellect and supernatural senses, the Ankou Soul Herald is a master of perception and persuasion. It can navigate the realms of the living and the dead with ease, its true sight piercing through the veil of illusions and deceit. A being of deathly essence, the Ankou Soul Herald is immune to cold, necrotic, and poisonous elements that would afflict lesser creatures. Its presence instills fear in the hearts of those who would dare to oppose it, rendering them powerless with its horrifying presence, which requires a DC 19 wisdom save, and failure results in being paralyzed for a minute. But perhaps the most terrifying of all is the Ankou Soul Herald's ability to cloak itself in ghostly shadows, essentially becoming invisible to the naked eye. In this form, it becomes almost untouchable, its movement swift and precise as it strikes from the darkness, and they can move unimpeded through creatures and objects. Now in battle, the Ankou Soul Herald is a force to be reckoned with. Its claws and teeth are capable of rending even the sturdiest of armor. Its Reaper's breath unleashes a torrent of cold fire, consuming all who stand in its path with relentless fury. Its range is 120 feet, and it deals 12d10 of damage, and that's about 66 on average. After you're hit with this breath, the targets need to make a DC 19 wisdom save, and failure results in you not being able to move for 1 minute. You're not really paralyzed unless you fail by 5 or more, but you do get to re-roll the save on each of your turns to try to break free. Yet, its true power lies in its ability to shapeshift, taking on the form of any creature it desires, be it a beast, humanoid, or undead. Now, with this ability, it can deceive and manipulate its foes, luring them into traps of its own design. And when all seems lost, the Ankou Soul Herald can call upon its Usher of Souls ability, transporting itself and its allies to distant planes of existence, beyond the reach of mortal reckoning. The Ankou are enforcers of fate. Now, despite being able to live until the end of time, they are still capable of being killed. Creatures that manage to cheat death by using their own wit and cunning are often viewed with a sense of grudging respect by the Ankou, who is responsible for shepherding the souls to their final destination. However, the Ankou is still compelled to send these clever mortals to the realms of death. If a mortal kills an Ankou, they will not receive any admirations for their cunning. So, killing an Ankou will provoke other Ankou Soul Heralds and Soul Seekers to go on a personal hunt for the transgressor. Revenge, of course. And the Ankou Soul Seeker will ensure that the creature's soul is cast into the hells to be punished for their transgression. Now, in my mind, you should not be able to kill a Reaper of the Dead, the Ankou. Despite having an average hit points of 407, the Ankou can top out at 616, which will outlast an average party. Now, if you want to be especially cruel as a GM, you could potentially add the regeneration trait, which the creature does not have in the book, making it very harder for an average party to kill them, because essentially the Ankou will win by attrition. So when you look at them for the first time, you think that you're dealing with an undead, until a cleric or paladin's turn ability does not work after multiple tries. Despite their skeletal visage, they are still dragons. Ankou are rarely granted a chance to rest, constantly traveling the plains to usher spirits to their final resting places. And when an Ankou has a moment of respite, it often returns to the lair it kept in life. Now, this sometimes creates awkward situations for the dragon's family if they still reside in this lair. And even dragons have some apprehensions about sharing a home with a relative turned reaper. When living alone, Ankou often decorate their lair with mementos that remind them of their past lives, and these could be portraits of mortal friends who have long passed away. It could be gold coins minted by a friend from a now-destroyed kingdom spread all around the lair, or there'd be a spellbook of a fallen comrade. But one thing all Ankou lairs have in common is a pile of bleached bones somewhere within. These death spirits find they sleep best when nestled on a bed of bones. And when and where would you play this creature? Well, gosh, anywhere. But what comes to mind is if one of your party members dies, the Ankou could appear to collect their soul. You don't want to see, one of your party members go on to the great beyond. So perhaps you can negotiate with an Ankou, or would you choose to fight it? I don't know. But it would be interesting to see how it plays out at your table.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. Like, just the idea of basically a dragon Grim Reaper taking over the River Styx. Like,
yeah. And again, they don't have to look like a dragon at first look.
What would be interesting is if its family, like you said, like sometimes they go to its lair and the rest of the dragons from its family are like awkward about it. If the dragons ask the party to get rid of the Ankou.
Yes, we've got we
will spare the town. You get rid of our cousin.
Yeah, we won't eat you. Get rid of our cousin.
Yeah. But you're the town asks you to take care of the dragon problem, and you get to the dragons like, we could just kill you, but if you do us a favor, we'll leave the town alone.
Please do us this favor. Please.
Yeah, please. Our cousin just doesn't fit in.
Yeah. And it's a fun creature to play because, again, you can drop it anywhere. It could be a spirit that's constantly following you. Every time you start combat, one or more of the party members can see this creature. And you can really mess with your player by having like this creature as part of combat. I don't know. I'm kind of riffing here, but the creature is very appealing. It's definitely fits in with what we've been talking about this episode where, they are enforcers of fate, and part of your fate is death, and they will be there upon your death, and they will immediately take your soul onward, assuming that the Valkyrie doesn't claim you first.
I absolutely love the art on this creature, by the way. It's one of my favorites. So not a bad creature, man. I like this one. This was a good choice. You're right. You went to the other side of the spectrum on this one. This is a crazy one.
Definitely check them out. And again, I just was perusing through the book, and I came across that feature, and I said, this one will work for this episode. Yeah. So yeah, definitely do that. Well, that's our show. I hope you enjoyed it. Joe, how can people reach you?
You can find me at GM Toolbox on YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. I'm also on Twitter at GM_Toolbox. And of course, you can find me on the Midgard Adventures and the koboldpress official Discords at GM Toolbox. How about you, Clay?
Yeah, you can reach me on the Midgard Adventures and koboldpress Discord servers as well. I'm at Clayton Thompson, and that's all one word, and that's Thompson without a P.
If you like our show, please click on the like button, subscribe to our channel, and spread the word about That Midgard Show. Don't forget, we're also on all the major podcast platforms. So if you're listening there, please subscribe, leave us a positive comment, and give us a 5-star review. But that's it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed the show. And remember, as Wolfgang Barr says,
strip it for parts and make it your own. Take care, everyone, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.